Good morning. It is Friday, May 10th, 2019, and welcome to Drugs and Crimes for the next 5.5 weeks. My name is Richard Wright, and many of you know me from other classes. I will be your instructor, and we're going to have some very interesting things that you're going to learn here. And this course is a course I really enjoy teaching a lot because we deal with some hands-on things that are happening, contemporaneous things that are going on, how the law is changing as far as dealing with drugs and attempting to help individuals. You're also going to learn about the seriousness of the problem. You're going to hear the term epidemic used quite a bit when it comes to dealing with the issue of drugs, and you're also going to hear me say probably more than once that there is a correlation between drugs and crime, and that many crimes have something to do with drugs. And we're going to talk about all those things for the next 5.5 weeks. But for today, I'm pretty much going to go over the expectations of this course, and then I'm going to share a little story about myself, which you'll learn about me. And many of you already probably know about it because you've been in other classes with me. And I've also discovered that many of you take this course at the same time as you take the Introduction to Criminal Law. So you'll have me for that. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Today's class will last roughly an hour and a half, maybe even a little bit longer, but our lectures after this will be will not be on an hour and a half, and they will not be on Friday. They will be on Tuesday night, 8:30 to well, not Tuesday night. Yeah, I think it is Tuesday night, 8:30 to 9:30. Let's look down here so I can. Mondays. I'm sorry. It'll be Mondays. I told one student Tuesdays. It'll be Mondays, starting. Lecture will take place beginning Monday, May 10th. That meant Friday, May 10th. Maybe that's why there's not a lot of people here. Let me correct this, because it should be Friday. It should be Friday. But I think I put that in your announcements. Anyway, okay, so it's Friday, May 10th. Monday, then we will have lectures again. So you'll have one today and then Monday. Anyway, here's my name, here's my number, and then here's a statement about me that I hold dear. Students can feel free to call me, text me, email me any hour of the day except the 25th hour of the day. And what that simply means is what it says, is that I'm available to help my students. I've talked to many of my students in situations where they were, let's see, I got to reload the page here. So let's see what happened here. Let's go back. Okay, submitted. Okay, because I'm not, oh, there we go. So anyway, so it means that I'm available to help you. And many of you already know that from experience. You also learned that the next statement I make is very important. Notice the capitalization of rubrics. I will say this from day one, that in order to get good grades in this course, your primary source of information to determine whether or not you satisfied the requirements of the assignments is, well, there are two places. You have the module itself, but the rubrics are so important that you satisfy them. That's how I grade you, and I put comments in each little section if necessary. Some I just put a check mark. If you see a check mark in there, that means I've satisfied, you've done everything you need to do. But always read my comments, because my comments will guide you and will help you in terms of doing well and getting your assignments completed according to the requirements of the module or the assignment itself. And then APA. APA is required for all written assignments. You'll see that below. That means citations in the body, references at the end, cover page, Roman 12 point. But there's certain ways that you should have your citations. For example, if you cite a court case, the court case should have the official court citation in it. And in our library and learnings, there's a place where you can learn about that, where you can make sure you have citations. And then there's some articles that I have included to help you as well. So APA is very important. And then critical thinking. Critical thinking involves you're including yourself analyzing the issues, not just taking the information that you discovered from your research, but also inputting yourself so that you can make sure that the information that you are providing is actually reaching someone. So let me make sure that my, okay, I see. I was trying to make sure that my mic was not muted. So I'm going to stop sharing a minute because I can see something. So yeah, my mic is going on, so I'll go back to sharing. So go back to this. So anyway, critical thinking is very, very, very important as well. And then there is a video down here which I'll pass through in a minute to tell you about it. Where it says additional resource information, course information, make sure you become familiar with this box because it reiterates the requirement for research for all papers, that the sole source of the papers should not be the textbook. The idea is to conduct research whenever you complete your assignments. And you'll see little sometimes overlooked balance of how each assignment should be, and you'll see research, reflection in there, and I'll show it to you in just a few minutes. Some of you overlook it. And then these are helpful resources to help you, such as the Peer versus Mentor, the Student Success Guide, the Library Frequently Asked Questions, the Writing Guide, and then the guides to the library. Now, each school pretty much has its own. That is the School of Justice Studies. We have our own librarian, Dennis Johnson, and then we have our Learning Center person, Bethany Marston, who is responsible for many things. One of the things she's responsible for is providing the tutors. You have student tutors, some of who are in this class already, some of who are in my other classes as well. And you will discover that these students have achieved success, understand many of the things that we say, and they constantly are on the honor roll and dean's list as well. And so anyway, it tells you about tutoring. Now, tutoring is not just for people who are in trouble. Tutoring also can help you to perform better as well. All right, so this a whole lot of information to help you with that. Some very important articles here. How to go beyond the textbook, when we talked about that already. Some analytical tips for criminal justice. This helps you with your critical thinking. The importance of information literacy, using proper sources, not using sources like Wikipedia, which never use Wikipedia. If you look at your rubric and get accustomed to it, you'll see it specifically mentioned as one of the sources never to use. And then referencing for students, and don't worry about the last one because you won't have it so much. This is a video I was talking about concerning critical thinking. If you copy and paste this onto your browser, you can take a look at this video, and it's very short, and it gives you an idea of what critical thinking is. And then rubrics, it says written assignment and course project located in each weekly module. You'll find that in weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5. The reason why you won't see it in 6 is because you have a final exam, but week 1, you don't really have a written assignment with a rubric. You do have discussion posts, though, each of those weeks. And discussion posts you guys should be familiar with are usually generally due on Tuesdays, and for initial posts and reply posts on Saturday. But this week, as you already have discovered, that both are due tomorrow, the 11th. And after that, then you'll see Tuesdays for initial posts, Fridays for reply posts, except when we get to the last week. And we'll get there fast, trust me. Also, while I'm talking about discussion posts, I want to get this all out of the way. Discussion posts should be content-oriented. It should demonstrate that you have done some research, that you've gotten some materials that can help you to respond back to the issues that are before you. Simple yes or no answers, or I like your post, or good post, that's not adequate. You will not get points for that. The idea of the discussion post is to take place of the fact that, to take place of what would happen if you were in the physical classroom with me. Then you could ask questions, and then we would have exchange back and forth. Here, we exchange back and forth, and I say we because I will be commenting on some of your discussions. I will pose questions to you. I will post my thoughts, oftentimes in my own posts that you'll see that are included within the discussion. And it's important, and what we're doing is we're getting the critical thinking going in each of you, and we're communicating our thoughts and ideas about the issues that are in the discussion forum for that week. I do encourage you to reply to more than one post. You don't get extra points for it, but it makes the discussion forum more interesting as well. And then finally, regarding the discussion posts, it is important for you to understand that discussion posts are due on Tuesday and then on Saturday, with the exception of this week and with the exception of the last week. But weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5, initial post Tuesday, reply post Saturday. Now, be aware of this issue. Discussion posts will not receive points after discussion forum ends, no matter how well you submit them. So if you have a problem or an issue, then you need to make sure that you at least get your discussion post. One of the easiest assignments that you have involving this course or any course that you have is to get those done. Each day that they're late, you lose 1 point. But let's say your initial posts are submitted on Saturday, both initial and reply posts, with the exception of this week. Remember, I'm saying this now. Listen, make sure you keep this in mind. That in the course of 2, 3, 4, and 5 weeks, week 5, that your discussion post submitted on Saturday, you will lose points because it was due that Tuesday. So you lose 1 point for each day. And then assuming that the one Saturday that you post, the reply post, is satisfies the requirements of the rubric, which you'll see in there. That is a generic rubric, but we use it for discussion posts in all classes. And then the point is that so you will get your points that are given minus some. Now, one other thing, if you post your initial post within the time period that the discussion takes place, which is actually Monday through Saturday, you will be okay to submit a reply post on Sunday. Even though it's over, I still give students a chance to do that. But you will lose a point automatically for that. So the point of the matter is that if you submit your initial post and reply post on Sunday, uh, that after that discussion forum ends, it won't count at all, because the idea is that you haven't given your classmates a chance to be able to respond to your initial post. And so anyway, you won't get any points at all. So, and it's pretty clear. The school has a policy which is in the syllabus, which I won't go over. I'm getting it out of the way right now. And so that's what I want to say about this discussion post. Reminder, your lectures will take place today is 9 to 10:30, and week 1, which is today, is an open house, but lectures for weeks 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 will take place on Mondays, starting at 8:30 to 9:30. You must attend a lecture or listen to it. Each week there'll be a keyword given. I will be emailing you the recording, and then I will post it on in this box under recordings. And each week you will see the recording link as well. What I do is I convert my recordings to YouTube, and what it does is it makes it more user-friendly so that students can use it in all kinds, because YouTube is pretty readily available, and students can do it on their phones too. Students, all kinds of ways people do it. People sometimes listen to the recordings in their cars. They hook up their system and listen to them in the cars. They don't look at the lectures, but they'll listen to what is said, so as if it's on radio. But the point of the matter is that then you will be able to get that information. There is an app that can be used for WebEx, but sometimes there's problems with WebEx, as you'll discover during the course of the quarter. Sometimes there's some system issues with WebEx, and I really don't have any system issues with using YouTube, and it's very, 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 very user-friendly, of course, because you guys use YouTube anyway, aside from school. So the recordings will say YouTube on it, and if you click on the link or copy and paste the link in your browser, then you'll be able to see. In addition to it being posted in this box, I will also email each of you the links for that as well. So here we get over to the course announcements. There's some things that you'll see that help you with the writing process, and it tells you the steps to go through for the writing process. And I do want to point out one thing here where it talks about using the writing lab. Make sure you understand that you have to do it timely, because it takes roughly 48 hours for them to get it back to you. You will not get an extension in your assignment due date because of that. You have to do that early enough. Make sure you run your papers through Grammarly. Each of you have a Grammarly account. And the Grammarly is very important for two things. Deal with your spelling and your grammar, but also there is a plagiarism check that you perform, and I perform it. That's one of the big things that I look at, to see if you are providing too much of the sources that you researched. And trust me, the system picks up pretty well. And that, oops, I didn't even know this phone was on. It's not supposed to be on. Yeah, I'm going to tell you that as we complete this lecture, then, so I'll make a call back after that. So anyway, that's someone that I was been waiting for a call for. I didn't know it was going to happen today. I got to turn the volume down on it so that I don't get another call. Sorry about that. All right. So anyway, I want to share with you that it's important for you to understand Grammarly. And so what happens with Grammarly is that you will find that I will check to see how much material you've used. Now, you'll see my comment that's frequently in there that there's a high percentage. Usually I let students go up to 25%, which is high. but in our program, I allow up to 25. Some professors may go less, and some may not even pay attention to it at all. But it's a disservice not to bring it to your attention because you need to learn how to properly do this. If you don't adjust and correct your Grammarly, the school will take action, and I don't want that to happen. I've only had one student since I've been teaching that's been dismissed from the college for not correcting that issue, because I even will send a student to tutor on Grammarly and APA, but particularly for Grammarly because of the fact that what we want to do is we're more interested in your critical thinking. That's why we talk about that. And it's one of the transferable skills that's very important. Employers want you to be able to have that as it. And when we get to transferable skills, I'll mention that again. But it's important that you use Grammarly so that you can find yourself with the information that you need that will help you to submit papers where you have more critical thinking, and then your sources are there to support your critical thinking. That's the way it's supposed to be thought of, as opposed to your critical thinking, as opposed to your resources there and supporting your critical thinking. It should be your critical thinking, I'm sorry, it should be your critical thinking provided first, and then your resources to support your critical thinking. That's the way that we pointed out. That's why I have students that say, oh, I put citations and references in, but I still get a Grammarly hit. Yeah, it's because it's also the content that you use that's not offset by critical thinking. The more critical thinking you have, the percentage goes down. And sometimes you have to make sure, particularly when you're doing a one-page document. So very important that you remember Grammarly, okay? So I'm going to move along. APA, there's assistance available. There's a link here that you can click on. There is also in your resources tab a place as well as resources in the top right corner of your course homepage. And you can see it right here above here where I put my mouse. There it is there. And you'll find information about APA and things that will help you. There are videos in there that can help you as well. Utilize those things to help you in all classes. And then I'm just going to take a quick look at the announcements that you received thus far. The first announcement is the one that is a welcome announcement. Pay close attention to every one of these highlighted points announcements: student lounge, course mail, syllabus, calendar. We'll go over that in a minute. The calendar has every due date for all assignments. It has some information in it other than what you'll see when we get to it. General course questions is a place where you can provide questions that anyone can answer, including you guys, but it's not private information. You want to put private information in there, that's not a good idea. You could email me, text me, or call me with those things. And then here's the resources tab I was talking about. The report tab is for you to see how your grades are coming along. Now, be aware that your grades, my goal is every Friday to submit by the end of Friday to have submitted your grades for that previous week. So your assignments that you're doing this week that are due Sunday, starting with Monday all the way up to that Friday, which is the 17th, I should have all of your discussion posts graded. I should have all of your written assignments graded, and that's my goal. And I've got a system that I use to help me to stay on track with that. Because there are students who say to me, "Hey, I submitted it on Sunday, or I submitted it earlier, and why am I getting it back by the end of the week?" That's because of the school policy that they give us, recognizing the fact that we as professors have so many classes that we teach, particularly as full-timers, that we need to be able to read these materials. And I read them. I read your stuff. I read very quickly. I've been teaching these classes long enough that I know there are certain issues and points that I stress. And since you guys have lectures every week, one of the things that I will be doing in every lecture is going over the written assignments for that week. I don't spend as much detail the week 1, but starting in week 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up through week 6, I cover the assignments. So anyway, so your grades will be submitted by that method. And then there's some information about APA, excuse me, homework assistance, trying to battle a little cold here with my voice. And then there's some library and learning center information. And then there's a reiteration here of, see, I did have it in here that it will take place today, May 10th, Friday at 9 to 10:30. A few students have already told me that they couldn't make it. It's very interesting. I tried doing lectures in the morning. I tried doing them in the afternoon. And then primarily I do them late at night, and I get the same result. So I decided I'm going to just do it in the evening because then that is a time when it works best for me, and then I'm able to not be interrupted as much and those kinds of things. So anyway, our lectures will begin, as I already said, Monday the 13th, other than today. Then there is, make sure that you use the Lessons tab in each weekly module, not just assignments, because you'll learn valuable things. And you'll see me cover those during our lectures themselves. All right? So that's that. But pay close attention to all of these highlighted points. They're pointing you out, and take time to read the paragraphs that are in here. So now I'm going to reduce that to less. Then I want to open up and go with what we have today. So each week you'll see an announcement, at least one. You may see 2 sometimes, and then there's going to be something else that I'm working on trying to do, and I may not implement it until the summer quarter, where I will be doing some oral as well as possibly video announcements as well. Needless to say, though, each week you will see one of these, and it just basically gives you the information, again, about what we're going to cover that week. So Module 1, we deal with psychoactive drugs, categories, and how it affects the body. The classification of controlled substances will be presented. And so you read chapters 1 and 2, which also I previously sent you the PowerPoints for your guidance. I don't use those during the lecture. They're for you to help you, and pretty much it's a summary of the chapter and helps you to prepare. And then you'll see that we'll deal with activities to control Substance Act, the control the narcotics, amphetamine, cocaine, and synthetic drugs. That's for this week. And then it talks about the next paragraph, what's happening right now in the lectures and so forth. Okay? Then the discussion post, the topic, classification of drugs and controlled substances, and we already talked about the deadlines and things, so I won't beat that again. But you will notice one thing here, is that for first week, they are both due tomorrow, as I said earlier. You're going to see, don't get accustomed to that, because reply posts will still be due on Saturdays, but initial posts will be due on Tuesdays. And then there is the quiz for this week. And you're going to, there's a time quiz, and you want to make sure that you've gone through the material and complete that as well. And then it talks about the lecture. Then it says at the bottom of the announcement, adversity is a springboard to success. I will share with you what that means in just a little bit at the end here. So now let's take a look at the course calendar. Course calendar is populated with everything, and it tells you starting from the day the class started, what your reading assignment is. If you click on it, it opens it up. So it's not just what you look at there. You have to click on it. And then your live lecture, which is taking place now, and it tells about that. And then it tells about your initial post and reply post. You can see that the calendar provides you with another place to know when assignments are due. So this week, your quiz is your only written assignment other than your discussion post. And again, it's a time quiz, and that's all I can tell you. But I will tell you it's based on the material. And then also, these check marks here are due dates. This says, one of them tells you when the quiz is due, which is Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then the other one, it tells you when the live lecture keyword that I'm going to give you at the end or at some point, probably have mentioned, we'll mention it, and you'll have that as well. All right, and so that's what you'll have here. I don't know why I got quiz twice. Oh, there we go. So you got the quiz right there. That's because when I clicked on it, I didn't close it back out. All right, so then everything starts over the following week. So remember, our lectures, you'll see from that point, are the 13th, the 20th, the 27th, and the 3rd of June. All right, and then you could go to the last one, which will be the 10th. So they're every Monday starting then. And then you can see everything is due. Notice that the 14th, and I'll say this over and over, the quarter ends on the 14th, that Friday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Some people think it would be the 16th. It is not, but we will get there. But again, there it is right there on your calendar. Become familiar with your calendar. It helps you a whole lot to keep track of things, all right? 5.5 weeks goes so fast that you will, before you know it, we'll be at that point where we'll be at June 14th. We'll be there fast enough. Notice that in 4 days, that'll be exactly 1 month away. All right, so that's what I wanted to share with you concerning the calendar. So now let's go to the syllabus. Spend a little time on the syllabus. The syllabus is very important. Students don't pay attention to it, but it also reiterates information that you already know. My name, my phone number, which, by the way, I didn't mention it earlier. That is my cell phone. That is not a Google phone, and I have it with me all the time, as you already know, because it rang here. And I answer it late at night. I answer it early in the morning, but sometimes what I'll do is, just like right now, you didn't know a call was coming through, but it's on silent, but I will respond to all calls pretty fast. And then there's the email address. There's also my personal email address, which is in the student lounge, which you can see, richard@wrightgodisable.net. By the way, take time to look at the student lounge where I provide information about myself, and I look also for information concerning each of you. And then there is this same reminder that you saw on the course homepage. You'll see it one more time in this document. I'll scroll down just to show you. There it is, right there. So that information about APA is so much involved here. So anyway, the course description, it tells you what the textbook is. Somebody asked me about the textbook. This is where you find the title. Your textbook should be available to you, and if you have a problem getting it, reach out to your academic dean, student advisor, but first try to reach out to personal support, PSC, which their number is at the bottom of every page. Scrolling down here, they're 24/7. Don't ever tell me, says I couldn't, it was a holiday or Sunday. No, they're 24/7. even on holidays. They're available to help you. If you have a technical issue, spend time reaching out to them first, and then they'll issue a ticket and they'll work with you to help you. Anyway, these are the course requirements, and I'm not going to go over what these are. It says students are required to check the course announcement and message it at least 3 times a week. I recommend that you check them every day, every day. And we already talked about discussions, so I'm going to skip through that. These are the requirements. You have readings, your discussions. There will be 5 quizzes throughout the course. Each quiz will be a multiple choice. Then the course project, which is basically your written assignment, to be honest with you. And it's not a continuum thing. It's really the weekly assignment, written assignments that you have weeks 2 through 5. That's why you won't have a rubric for this week except for the discussion post. Then the final exam will be in week 6. All right. So then your live classrooms, you already know about that. And then you know about that. Here's the grading breakdown. You'll notice that your course project is 160 points. The next one are your quizzes, and then your discussion posts. So you see that that's a big portion. Your final exam is almost 50% of your grade as well. All right, not percentage, but point-wise. Well, not point-wise. You got 40 points there. But anyway, your percentage might appear to be lower. But look at your course project, how much in terms of percentage it is. It's almost 50%. That was what I was trying to say. And then your quizzes, and then your discussions. So don't try to analyze and say, oh, the smaller percentage, I don't have to worry about it. Trust me, it can make a difference in you passing and failing. They can make a difference in you getting an A or a B or a C and those kinds of things. So your goal ought to be to maximize and hit 60 points for this, 75 for this, 160 for this, and this one as well. So you'll have 40 points for each one. There are 4 of them, 2, 3, and 4. Then you'll have 160 points by following the rubric. And then your final exam, you will have gone over the materials. You'll also have, as I said, it's comprehensive, the PowerPoints to have helped you each week, along with you having done your reading and along with the lectures, and you will be prepared for the final exam. And then the live classroom here, all right? So that's the total points. Now, my goal is to keep you in this first 5 sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do not call me, text me, email me to ask me the following question. Professor, what do I need to do to get a C in this course? I'm not going to answer you. I'm not being rude about it. I don't produce C students. I produce A and B students. My goal is for A students, but if you miss the mark, at least get the B. But the point of the matter is that C students are average students. When you get into that mode and habit, you will have problems down the road because of the fact that employers are not looking for C students. They're looking for A and B students. They're looking for the best and who have demonstrated good work ethic, good time management, the skills and ability to be able to follow directions, which is so important in these assignments. I'm really dogmatic about making sure that you follow directions. That's why I'm so tough on APA and Grammarly, because it has to do with integrity in terms of providing more of you. Remember, when you are hired because of your contribution that you can make to the organization. And so in class, I'm going to grade you primarily on your contribution to your assignments. I'm looking at your critical thinking. It is so important to me. I want to see what's happening up here in the mind. What do you think about the issues that are concerning the assignment? Not just researching and copying and pasting and taking the material. Not just providing citations and references. That's giving credit. That's one of the requirements for jobs as well as education. Plagiarism is a bad thing. It shows lack of ethics. Some people don't do it for that reason. They'll do it in error. But the key thing is that we want to get into the habit of seeing your critical thinking. You'll keep hearing me say that. You'll hear that discussed a lot of times in this school by professors who really have your interest at heart and are preparing you for exit into the real world. So anyway, A and B students. So that's it. Inevitably, somebody comes and they will ask me that question, and I'll have to defer them back to listen to my statement that I made. This is my participation. You can take time to read that. I always follow that, and I exceed that, actually. Transferable skills. We've determined that based on what employers have told us, there are certain skills that they're looking for students to have. And so we start to embed those in your assignments, and you can identify them by the assignments that you're doing. Communication is so important. It is one of the big issues that employers are looking for, good communicators. In criminal justice, communication is essential. You're going to be dealing with people from various backgrounds who speak various languages, who communicate from various cultures, and you're going to need to be able to reach them, even if you don't speak the language. I speak no Polish, but I can still communicate with people who speak Polish. I can use my body language. I can speak English, and some of the English that they are able to speak is not as good as mine because I was born here. But the point of the matter is that there are people who need to be able to be reached that don't speak fluently the language that you understand. That's my whole point. But you're still going to be able to need to communicate. And then in written communication, many of your documents can be used in court cases. And trust me, as a lawyer, I use documents where police reports had errors in it. I won a case once because the report had something happening on April 31st. Well, there is no April 31st. And I saw that one little thing. And what I did was I pointed that out. And so I had to get the person on the stand to admit that that was an error, a mistake. As soon as they said that, they looked unprofessional. And it was a little thing, but the jury began to doubt the credibility of the law enforcement people in that situation. Professionalism is involved as well. Critical thinking, well, I've already talked about that. Digital fluency, everything is digital. Right now, you know, we got these things here. My textbook is digital. My textbook is on my phone. I have a system where I can go and I can see my my textbooks on my phone. There's an app that I have. I'm very conscious and use those things. I welcome them. My phone is full of apps, if you can just see that right there. And these apps are for various things, including my textbooks. And so the course online, when I was in school, we didn't have any of that. It wasn't invented when I graduated from law school in 1978. But I've adapted to it, and so it's really something that can benefit you as a student, and you're going to use it a whole lot in terms of being able to use systems like Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, PDF, Adobe PDF. You're going to have to learn how to utilize all of these different processes. WebEx for your lectures. You're going to have to understand how to use those. So you got to be fluent digitally, be able to use the computer and find information. Diversity, you're going to meet people from all backgrounds. I've already said that. You're going to have to learn to respect those individuals. You're going to have people who have different cultures, different religious beliefs, different sexual preferences. You're going to have LGBT people, even if you're not one or you believe in. You still have to respect everybody in their culture. That's the key. You learn how to do that too in the discussion forums in this class, where you don't shoot somebody down. You can disagree with them. I disagree with my students a lot, and the reason why is because I'll explain to them why what they say is not correct and correct them. But I'm not shooting you down. I'm just pointing you to the correct information. But diversity is very important that we promote it here at the school. We have a actual committee, the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And you know, they don't talk about inclusion, but diversity and inclusion go hand in hand, where not only do you respect the people, but also you learn from those individuals. You learn a lot of different things. If you listen to a lot of WebEx, not WebEx, if you listen to YouTubes and you listen to these different lectures or things that take place on the internet, you'll find information that will help you, and you'll be able to learn from people from all different backgrounds. So you're going to learn to respect the individuals. Then you're going to be working with teams, and you'll be able to, as a team member, participate to satisfy the requirements for whatever case that you're handling, investigation, and so forth. You're going to have people from forensics. You're going to have people who are lawyers. You're going to have people who are prosecutors, defense attorneys. You're going to deal with medical people, scientific people, and so forth. The next topics go hand in hand. Ethics. Ethics are so important, especially in criminal justice. And I always say this: if you're an unethical student, you're probably going to be an unethical professional. And unethical students end up in bad situations. As I already said, there was one I know that was dismissed from the college, but then you could be dismissed from your jobs, or you could be incarcerated for if you're law enforcement, or if you are in parole, probation, or one of these areas, and you write a phony report, or you don't follow the rules which deal with professional responsibility, you could find yourself in hot water. And so these are skills that we indicate to students that we want you to learn and be able to apply as employers will be looking for. And then information literacy. I already have shared some information on the course homepage about that. Using credible resources, not using Wikipedia, and being able to find information that is scholarly, and be aware that sometimes there's information that you get that is put out by an organization and it's biased. For example, if there's using the hypothetical, if you see that, oh, milk is absolutely the best thing and it's been demonstrated that it lengthens your life, and then you see the study was paid for and sponsored by the Dairy Farmers of America, you know why that is. So that's not to say that's wrong, but just keep that in mind when you are looking at things. It's like I tell people, the internet is good and it's bad, but it's like anything else. It's going to have good information out there, and it's going to have bad information out there. So you have to, as we say in a slang term, be able to eat the fish and throw away the bones, or the chicken and throw away the bones, or whatever has bones, the steak and throw away the bones, that kind of thing. The attendance policy I won't spend time on, but I will spend a little time on the late assignment submission policy. I've already talked about it regarding discussion posts, but I will say this, that assignments, as I said, are due, generally written assignments are due on Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Each day after that, you lose 10% of your grade. And it says all the way up to 7 days. Well, it's really before that. Let me give you a hypothetical. You get 100% if it's done properly on Sunday. Monday, if you submit that same assignment, you'll get a 90%. Tuesday, you submit that same assignment, it's 80%. Wednesday, you see what I'm saying? It's down to 70%. And by Thursday, which is only 4 days later, it's 60%. So you see what I mean when I say it doesn't have to go to 7 days. But what the point of the matter is for the 7 days is that you should be able to get assigned work in. But you will still lose those points. Now, as a professor, the third line in here says instructors may waive the late penalty or time frame in the case of extenuating circumstances. And then it says as determined by the faculty. Your dean doesn't determine it. Your advisors don't. They leave it to us. They'll always tell you, go back to your professor, see what they say. And I have certain policies that I've implemented down through the years, and many of you are familiar with me and understand how I am. Extenuating circumstances is determined on a case-by-case basis, and there are certain things that I really work with students on, such as military requirements. I don't want your military responsibility to be an obstacle to your assignments being completed. And I understand the rules concerning that. I've never been in the military, but I do appreciate the service and those kinds of things. But I don't think extenuating circumstances has to do with you had to do a double shift and all of that. It's a time management issue because I have responsibility of many things, and I have to do my time management to get things done, such as getting your grades done, such as having lectures. I have a family. I'm a pastor of a church, and there are other things that I do. But I have to manage those. But there are extenuating circumstances. When you run into a situation, let me know right away about it. Don't delay it. And the best method to let me know about it is texting, calling me. Emailing is okay, but because I do have access to emails in my personal email, which you have, and also it is available through my email, not the course email, because I have to open up the course to see it, but I have faculty email that's richard.wright@Rasmussen, however way you want to say it, .edu. And you have a similar thing, but yours says S-mail, which stands for student mail. But I don't have S-mail in mine because I'm not a student. So anyway, you could, if you do that, it'll show up on my phone, and I'll see it. But the best practice where you get contemporaneous responses is my texting. And I turn around very quickly and respond to them. So let me know, and we will work together. I've had some really tough situations, such as deaths in the family, immediate families. I mean, I won't go through and give you any, but there's a lot of them, and I respond to them. Now, there are some things in here such as labs or exams must be completed at the designated and cannot be made up. And then I could give you other activities and other assignments, such as missing discussion posts. I don't do that because I have too many students that fall in that category. And then, and then it says in the bottom, the last statement, a lot of people don't read it. In no circumstances may a student submit work after the last day of the term unless they have followed the incomplete grade process, and that has been requested and granted before that. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And so that information explains how it works under here. And then we get down here to the academic integrity policy. and you'll see things like cheating. I haven't had anybody so far to do any of these things, collusion, destruction, but I've had some plagiarism, and I'm explaining to you, you know, how that works, and I have explained that to you. So it is very, 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 very important, okay? Notice what it says at the bottom. People who violate the academic integrity policy commit academic misconduct in credit by assessment test out and other prior learning options automatically fail the assessment and cannot retake it, in which the violation. So there's an appeal process for all of that, but then you can ultimately end up in possibly being dismissed from the college. You read all of that there yourself. And so with that being said, let's look at our week 1. We have about a half an hour, about 34 minutes to go. So let's look at assignments. Now, your discussions, we've already kind of covered that. And this is what this week's, and you follow the instructions in here, okay? Now, you'll see that I posed a question already for week 1 about the drugs, and the one that I deal with is marijuana, and I posed a question and see what many of you say responding to that. And then your reply post, it tells you what to do. Be sure to include proper citations to the source you relied upon for information. I'm really not that dogmatic about it, but yes, it is important that you do so. A lot of you use the textbook. Try to use other resources other than the textbook as well. And then, you know, tips on how to get started are found in the Drugs and Crime course guide, which I'll show you in just a minute. It's referred to in every week. Then your quiz. You'll have a quiz. It's a 30-minute quiz. And you want to make sure that you do this, and then you abide by the academic misconduct policy when you take that quiz. In other words, you're not supposed to have any materials. You know, I saw some people submit some answers in one of my fill in the blanks where I could tell they copied the material from some place and they got the 0 for their answer because I could tell it wasn't originally typed by them. They took it and got it from somewhere, or they had another window open and clicked over real quick. Not a good practice. And then your live lecture, we talked about that, all right? And then, you know, if you click on it, it tells you when it's due, and there it is. That's the date, which I've already shared with you. All right. Same thing here with the quiz. Tells you when that's due by. Same time. All right. Discussion post, I don't do that because the schedule in terms of when that is due. And that's the assignments for week 1. Okay. So that's why I said you have your discussion post and your quiz. That's your written assignments for week 1. So now you notice that when you get into the module, Drugs and Crime Course Guide, become familiar with this. It is a tool that was put into this. Every module have it, and you'll see this is what it looks like. And it is so beneficial. It covers each week's assignments, step by step for APA and tools that you need. Tells you about databases for articles and other sources. This right here, and I'll allow that, click on that. And there's a video that helps you to find newspaper articles and other things that you need for your research as well. And then it talks about, excuse me, the project and what the idea of it is. And it tells you you don't have to submit your papers to the writing lab. Remember, I already told you what the situation is. And these are steps that will help you. And then various sources you can find here. If you find these in our Library and Learning Center, they're going to be credible. They're going to be credible. But there's, this. You could click on this, and you can learn more about if your source is credible. But I can tell you that every source that is in our Library and Learning system has been vetted already, and that it is credible. So they're not going to put any that are not. So if you want to deal with those things, and this provides a lot of APA help, writing help, and there's things that will help you, and that's what the online library is for, okay, for the course, to help you complete your assignments successfully. Every week, you don't have to mark it because it's in every week's assignments, all right? So it is there to help you in your coursework. You have all kinds of help here, guys. You can't help but succeed. So then we get to the objectives every week. We spend a little time talking about those, but then there are different topics. Controlled Substance Act, the Controlled Substance Act activity, narcotics and synthetic drugs. And so today I'm just going to introduce what's coming up with the course project, and then I'm going to leave these things alone here. So these are some topics that we will be discussing in the normal course of lectures. You're going to read this today, or make sure you go through it. And then these are little exercises that will help you to understand, and then you're going to basically match the content, the drug, with whatever schedule that you believe that it fits under. And you could make a mistake. You can, for example, if you put peyote under here, it won't work. If you put it under here, it works. Put PCP, is it a 2 or 3? It's not going to work. It's not going to stick to the wrong one. Then it sticks to the correct one. And so that's how steroids, it's going to end up being a 3. And then Valium, of course, will be scheduled 4. And then you go next one, and you could do the same thing again with these other drugs. So this is just a little something to help you. It's a little study tool. And then this talks about amphetamines, narcotics, and coke, and then where they fit in. And then it talks about like marijuana. These are things that you want to open up, and you'll learn about marijuana. You'll learn about the origin of cocaine. Be aware that cocaine right now, one of the big issues with cocaine is this thing called crack cocaine. And you'll hear me talking about that in the weeks to come. And then it talks about the effects of it. Then it tells you what an amphetamine is and what methamphetamine is and so forth and so on. And then what are narcotics, and it explains the origin of all those things. So synthetic drugs, you're going to hear us talk a whole lot about these things. And so you're going to do the course of the week. We'll talk about them. So now, here's the course project, introduction overview. And so you're going to deal with the heroin that from every one of these assignments and various issues. And you're going to learn about what heroin is. You're going to learn how it originated. You're going to deal with opioids or synthetic drugs as well. And so in this course, you're going to learn that criminal justice professionals are going to deal with these through individuals that you're going to discover through our various lectures and videos. And in the course project, you're going to be doing research to learn about heroin and, as I said, and how it affects the body. And like I said, you're going to run across the correlation between that heroin, and you're going to learn about crime. So in week 2 module, when you get there, your assignment is going to be what is heroin, and you're going to follow what the rubric says. We'll deal with that next week. Week 3, heroin and how crime, I've already kind of tipped you off on that. 4, heroin and opioids. We talked about that a minute. The law enforcement perspective. We're going to talk about some very interesting things that you're going to learn about, such as deflection, and you'll hear that term a little later on. And then heroin and addiction, a person's journey in week 5. And so each part of the project requires a minimum of 3 credible sources. You cannot use your book as a reference for any part of this project. You see that? And once again, Wikipedia. And then you can't use it. You may include pictures in your paper, but it's not required. Now, notice this. It says 3 credible resources. So you don't have an assignment this week, okay? But you, like I said, you can still start to prepare for it. In week 2, it says you'll submit part 2 of the project. First, you'll research, and then you'll provide the paper. Then part 3, then part 4, part 5, based upon these weeks here. Each are independent. Each assignment is evaluated independently, and I'll provide grading criteria for each step of the project prior to, well, grading. You should, I can't talk. Your professor or instructor will provide you with grading criteria for each step of the project, and that's through the rubric. That's why it's so important. And then further questions can be submitted through the course questions. And that's it for week 1, except now I want to go back, and I want to stop sharing, and I want to remind you of what I said earlier about adversity is the springboard to success. And this is how I operate. And again, I apologize to many of you who may know this already, but there are some of you who don't. It starts out when I was 7 years old, and my dad was murdered by a man in my house in front of my face. I have a photographic memory, so I am 69 years old, and I still remember it. And during that time, the guy stabbed my dad. I was 7, and I had 5 younger sisters. This is Memorial Day of 1957, before many of you guys were even thought of, and even some of your parents. But the point of the matter is that I still remember it like it happened yesterday. The guy did not go to jail for that. The case was dismissed because they said there wasn't adequate evidence that the guy who stabbed my father wasn't doing it in self-defense, which was not true. But needless to say, he didn't go to jail. So he began sleeping openly with my mother. I would find out years later that the reason for the confrontation in the first place was that the guy was having an affair and my mom, and that's what caused my dad's death. So anyway, he didn't go to jail, but for the next 5 years after that, from 57 to 62, my mother and I and my sisters were exposed to the violence that this man, so we thus lived in a house of domestic violence, where my mother was brutally beaten. Sometimes her face was so disfigured that you couldn't recognize her. And I had to rub her down with witch hazel, which today is something that if it comes in front of me, I will shed tears about it, not because of the witch hazel, but because it's a trigger, and it takes me back. But so and every time this guy would go to jail, my mom would be right there to bring him back. And so the area we were living in was pretty tough, Lawndale on the west side of Chicago, which was a Jewish community, but it started to change in the 60s. And the gangs were involved. Well, the 2 gangs that were pretty big at that time made a pact that they wouldn't recruit me because they knew about what I had gone through as a kid with losing my dad. And so gangs had, you know, some integrity in operating and how they did their stuff. They would tell me, "Shorty, you're not involved. Get away from here. Something getting ready to go down." But when crack cocaine came into it, that changed it. That's a whole nother discussion. I just usually throw that in there so you'll know where I'm coming from. So anyway, my mom decided that she would move from the area, and we moved from the west side, where my mom owned the home, into a single family home. So it was a two-flat that we lived in at first, and Gary, Indiana, in an area called Terrytown. Really nice community. Don't look at it in terms of what you think of Gary now. It was totally different back in '62 when we moved out there. They had Little League. They had all kinds of activities. It was a very nice community. Well, the guy moved there, and then my mom sister came from Michigan and stayed with us, and she carried a gun, and because she operated restaurants, taverns for many years in Chicago before she went to live in Michigan, a place called Idlewild, which was a resort area, where she came and stayed with us, and the guy, ceased from doing anything to my mom during that period. And so she was with us, and my mom had a barbecue restaurant in downtown Gary and was doing pretty good. So anyway, she left to go back to Michigan in May of '63. And so about a year after we had moved into the house, and immediately after that, there were problems that started to happen. We're finally going to head to Memorial Day of 1957. Yes, and you heard me correctly say Memorial Day, when my dad was killed in '57. Memorial Day of '63 was the last day that I saw my mom alive. She left the house to go to a restaurant, left me in charge. By this time, my mom had two more kids, and they were girls by this man. The baby had been born in March 26th, I believe it was '62. So she was a little over a year old, so she was still little. At any rate, uh, there was 7 girls and me, and I was at that point 13, and as I had turned 13 May 3rd of '63. So anyway, I was responsible for the house, and I was, in charge. And everybody went to sleep, and then I woke up early the next morning, and the house was full of smoke. And I went in the kitchen and discovered that someone had turned on the stove, but there was barbecue in the stove, and it was smoking. So I opened the doors and windows to let the smoke out. I discovered and saw the car pull away, that my mother and this guy named Webster Scott was his name, who was still her living boyfriend. She never married him. And I saw them leave. So anyway, I went about the day, and everybody got up. And at some point during that day, 2 gentlemen showed up, identified themselves as Gary police officers. They I didn't want nobody into the house, but because they showed their badges and IDs, I said, okay, you can come in. And then they gave the bad news. They said, your mom, Sarah, was found dead in Chicago. And I started yelling, Scott, Scott, Scott. And then I quickly had to get hold of myself, because my sisters, I realized, oh my God, I says, I'm all they got left now. So anyway, we were taken from Gary to live with another aunt, one of my mother's sisters, in Chicago, in an area called Chatham. She let us come there, but she let us know that it was temporary, and that she really didn't, have a desire for us to stay long term, and didn't really want us there. But we were there, and they were discussing splitting us up, all 8 of us, and sending us in different directions. But my aunt from Michigan came back, got wind of that, and said, no, that's not going to happen. She and her husband, excuse me, took us and moved us into a house that she had built in an area called Maple Park, further south in Chicago. And so we moved in that house in '63, and I'm sorry, '64. '64, we moved into that house. And so anyway, excuse me. So we moved into that house, and when we started living there, seems like things were going to get better. But two things happened. First of all, the man who was my aunt's husband, who was really an uncle, and I didn't get along because he wanted me to take his last name, and I said no, I wanted to keep my last name because my dad, I'm the only one who could carry it on. The girls could get married, as many of them did. So anyway, he and I were at odds about that. And then, so there was a lot of privileges that I had, such as even getting a license and all kinds of things that they wouldn't help me with. So my aunt her hands were tied. So I spent a lot of time out of the house. Well, it was brought to my attention by someone at that time when I was 14 years old that Webster Scott, the man who had killed my dad earlier and killed my mom in May of '63, pled guilty and was sentenced to 10 years in jail. 10 years, which I wasn't happy about, but I said, okay, 10, I guess I could live with that. But it was brought to my attention that 10 meant 5. And it was further brought to my attention that for good behavior, he could serve 3.5 years. And that's ultimately what ended up happening. I was really, really disturbed then. And when I get disturbed, I started to ask questions. And it was brought to my attention from someone that the legal system was like that. And so I questioned what that was about. And I was told that these people called lawyers are responsible for that. Well, I'm a person, when I hear something I don't understand, I go to try to find out. And I was taught to go to the library and find a book about it. And I did. The school library, where I was in 8th grade, called Shoup School in the Morgan Park area, John D. Shoup. I went there and the librarian gave me a book that was on lawyers. And I took that book out and took it home and read it cover to cover. And guys, the next day, anybody I met after that, I introduced myself as Richard Wright, and I says, I'm going to become a lawyer. And that was my path. That's where I started out. That's what took me in a direction. Now, you should know that my interest was criminal law, but I wanted to be a lawyer. So anyway, immediately after I announced that, the aunt that we were staying with earlier and other people came and said, you know how difficult that is? That's going to be a tough road. And the aunt that I was living with at first, she tried to discourage me to say that I should try to do something else because that's a tough road to hoe. She felt like her children could do it, but my mom's children couldn't do it. I don't spend time telling people I'm going to do it. I just did it. And so anyway, here's what happened. So anyway, the other thing that happened there is that my aunt and uncle I was having trouble with. So I heard this lady on the radio that I liked, her voice. And I went and found the lady because my aunt let me go find her. I walked from Chicago's South Side to Harvey, Illinois, which if you know anything about it, that's a nice little distance. So I was a 14-year-old kid. Now remember, 14-year-olds at that time were little, not like 14-year-olds now. And so I met this lady. Her name was Mary D. And I said to her, I says, my name is Richard Wright. And so anyway, she took me into the studio with her. She was about to begin her show, and I did her show with her. After that, she said, so did you like radio? I said, it was okay. I said, but I didn't come to talk to you about radio. I came to talk to you because I like you, and I asked you if you'd be my mother. She just went, I mean, just threw her for a loop. And she said, I'm flattered, but she turned me down. She said, I'll be your friend. Well, long story short, she became my friend and was in my life quite a bit after that. I'd spend time with her and her family. I would go various places with her. And I would stay even, she had a room in her house that I could come when I was over there, and I stayed. And long story short, all the way to 80, she was in my life. She was at all my graduations. She would celebrate my birthdays with me. And so anyway, she ended up in 80, 85, I think it was 84, um, going to court and legally adopted me. By this time, my aunt, uncle, and all of them had, well, no, the aunt that didn't want us to stay there. She was still alive, but the aunt who had took us in was gone. Her husband was still around, but anyway, he and I never saw eye to eye for another reason. I found out later that he was going through my sisters, and you figure that out yourself. But anyway, my aunt and uncle, I had trouble, so I spent a lot of time out, hanging out with friends and family, and a lot of time at the community church. Well, they got to know me pretty well at the church, and they offered me a full ride to college. But my guardian would have to sign, and that would be my aunt and uncle. They said no, mainly because my uncle said no. My aunt couldn't do it over his head. So anyway, I said, okay, I'm going to be graduating in another year from high school. And I says, I'm going to be not moving, I'm moving out. I'd found out my aunt was really moving from there too, because she was chasing this guy down back into the city, into the urban area, and giving up that beautiful house there and renting it out to people. But anyway, some friends that I met, I ended up, their mom and dad let me come and stay with them. So I graduated from high school in 1969, Fanger High School. I ended up staying with them, and then I did two things. Number one, I registered for classes at what was called Loop City College, which is City Colleges of Chicago, and now it's called Harold Washington College, and I started taking classes at night. I was carrying a full load. I was carrying around things called books because none of the digital stuff was around then. I did not have a car. I was on public transportation. I had to catch two buses and one L train to get down to where my job was. I had to be at work at 8:30, and then I'd get off at 4, and then I'd have to rush to class and was in there till 10 o'clock. I did that Monday through Thursday, and then some Saturday classes I had. In the meantime, the other thing I did was my friend's mother knew someone at a big law firm in downtown Chicago. She got me a job as a messenger in a big law firm, and I started there, and I immediately met the various lawyers, and I introduced myself the same way as I did with other people after I read that book when I was 14. I says, my name is Richard Wright, and I'm going to be a lawyer. Well, they heard me, and then they saw my progress. Well, I was doing well in school, so I decided to do something that would throw a monkey wrench into this. I got married, and when I got married in 1970, a year after I had started college and graduated, not quite a year, in March of 1970, I had graduated in June of 69, got married to a young lady, and she and I both, she was in school and I was in school. She was studying to be a teacher, and at Chicago State University, which is once used to be called a teacher's college, but anyway, she was studying to become a teacher. So here comes along 71, child number 1 was a girl. Child number 2 is a girl, 72. So here I am now suddenly working. I got a family. I'm in school. And then the law firm decided that they saw how I was doing, so they promoted me from a messenger. By the way, while I was a messenger, I took a package one day to a gentleman by the name of Ray Kroc, who some of you may know. He was the chairman and founder of McDonald's, and he and I hit it off pretty well, and I became his personal messenger whenever packages needed to be sent to him at McDonald's. So anyway, I ended up doing that for a while, but then I got promoted from a messenger to a file clerk. The law firm saw me doing well, so they moved me up. And then they moved me up because something happened to the law librarian suddenly. And they asked me if I would be interested, and I took the job. Well, the job of law librarian was to be the custodian of the books. But what I did was I went beyond that, and I started looking at the material, sitting in the library as I was doing my work, listening to the lawyers discuss points of law and issues and so forth. So anyway, what I ended up doing was teaching myself how to do legal research. At that time, there were no systems that they have like Nexus Lexis and Westlaw and all those things. There were the books themselves, and they had systems like in the Key West system was for West Publication. Lawyers Cooperative had Amjur and so forth. Anyway, the bottom line is I learned how to research. So one day, here's what happened. One of the lawyers, or a team of lawyers, was sitting discussing points of law on a particular case. And they said, well, when they came back from lunch, they were going to go and start researching. So I heard what they said. I listened to what they were talking about and knew enough that I said, I know I can do this. I went and pulled those cases myself, put little slips of paper in the page where it started, opened the book, stacked them up, about 10 of them, and then on top of it, I put a legal pad that says, do not disturb. Well, after lunch, and I spent my lunch hour doing that. After lunch, the lawyers came back, and they came to me and they said, we can't find any of these cases. There's a vacant spot for every one of them we can't find on this point of law that we need. And there's about 10 cases or maybe more. Well, I said, come with me. And I showed them those books in the corner. And they said, who did this? And they looked at them and they said, these are all right on point. Who did this? I said, I did that. They said, you know how to do that? Well, that's when they discovered that I knew more than that. They took me immediately to my mentor, who was one of the senior partners, a guy named Harold Shapiro, and said, we're wasting money on this kid. We need to use him in some other capacity. So they created a position that was called a law clerk. And I began taking time to go to court with them, go to closings, real estate closings, attend mergers and acquisitions, all kinds of meetings with them. Well, they hired a person to do the job that I did and paid me more money. And so, again, that position is now known as paralegal. And so I continued with that several years. And then I left Loop College, of course, and went to another school, and that was Roosevelt University, which is a 4-year institution. I transferred there in '72, right after my second daughter was born, and declared my major to be political science, and that my minor was going to be in accounting. And so I continued working well with that on the dean's list and honor roll. And it came to the point then that I had to take the LSAT. So I took the law school admissions test. I didn't do too well at it, but I didn't think that that was going to stop me. So I was kicking around whether to retake it, but a few people said yes, some said no. Well, because my grades were like, you know, I was on the dean's list and honor roll every time the semesters came up under the circumstances I was telling you that I was working. So anyway, came time for me to decide the school. Well, I already had an idea of school because I had what they call a dream school, and that school was Northwest University School of Law. And so I began to focus my mind totally on that. The recommendation was that you apply to at least 3 schools. I said, I'm not doing that. I'm going to apply to the one I'm going to end up going to. Now, I wasn't arrogant or cocky. I was just confident in myself. So anyway, came time to put together the application. This was like in '74, and late '74, early '75, because classes started in the fall of '75. And so I submitted my application, sent it over. Now, there's usually about 6 pages, and they might ask for a resume and some other things. But when I sent the package, it was like a big box. What I did was I put writing samples in, and then I wrote in detail what I went through as my childhood to make me determined to want to become a lawyer. So I sent that over by one of the partners at the law firm who was an adjunct professor at the law school, Northwestern, and he delivered it to the admissions office. And the admissions committee had already made it clear in their book uh, concerning the law school that they had thousands of students, and they would come up with a class of roughly 175, but they would admit 250. But there were thousands of students all over the world vying for seats. So I felt that I could get one. So anyway, I got a phone call from the law school inviting me to come, telling me that that's not their norm, but that they wanted to see who was behind this package. And so I sat in a room at the law school, right on Lakeshore Drive, 357 East Chicago Avenue in Chicago. That's where the law school is located. Now it's called 375 because they added another building to it. But at any rate, I ended up sitting in a room, and there was about four or five people sitting across the table, and they asked me questions for about an hour, maybe even longer. It seemed like a long time. And I answered them, and I let them know, about the information about myself and that. So then they said, we're going to adjourn, and they adjourned and came back. It seems like forever. But then they came back and says, well, we don't determine whether we're going to admit somebody based on these scenarios. We just curious about who this person, Richard Wright, was with all this interesting material that was submitted that no one's ever done before. Well, they did say this. They says, what we will do, though, is we will be sending you some written correspondence that we think that you'll be happy about. Well, that was their way of informally telling me that I was going to be admitted to the school. I didn't know what conditions were. And so shortly after that, I received a simple letter welcoming me to Northwestern University School of Law to the class of 1978, which will commence in August of 1975. So I went on and I graduated from Roosevelt University. That same year, my ex-wife, my first wife that I had married, she graduated from Chicago State with a degree in teaching, and she began teaching. It was made clear to me at Northwestern that I could not work even a part-time job because it was going to be a tough curriculum, especially for the first year law school, because it's a 3-year program. They did not have night school or any of that. So I began to do that, and my wife at that time, who was teaching, was carrying the financial load as a teacher, which was okay. But then, even though it was tough, it was rough, here's what happened. We ran out of money. And the reason we ran out of money is because for the first time in history, the teachers went on a strike. Therefore, we started to have no income. Now, you got to remember, I'm in this strenuous program. So I reached a stage where I said, I'm just not going to be able to stay. This is going to be rough on me. And so I told one of my professors, Professor Joyce Hughes, that I was thinking about taking a leave and coming back. She said, come to my office and talk to me before you make that decision. So I followed her advice, went to her office. She let me in, told me to have a seat. Then she stood in front of the door. That was the only way out other than the window. She said, you're not leaving this room until you decide you're going to stick this out. She says, you're smart. You can do this. And so, I decided, okay, all right. And I wasn't going to lie to her and say, let me out and then quit. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And so the rest is history. I did it. And then 3 years later, she was one of the first people I thanked, and she congratulated me as I graduated with the class of 78, as you see the picture in the student lounge about me. Well, anyway, among the things that happened to me while I was in law school, one of my classmates, a guy who was in front of me named Bob Pincham, his dad, R. Eugene Pincham, was a noted criminal defense lawyer in Chicago. he would ultimately become a judge, a trial judge at 26 in California, now called the Layton Courthouse, and then an appellate court judge before he retired, and then he just passed, about the last 4 or 5 years. Anyway, Judge Pincham had several law students, and I was invited to come to his house with his son, and we sat and we talked law. And he shared with us experiences and quizzed us, and he did all kinds of things with us to help us become good lawyers. After everybody left, I sat and told him about my story of what I had gone through. He said, first of all, number one, you need closure. He says, I'm going to help you. We're going to go over to the courthouse, and I'm going to have them to gather all the records and get you copies of what happened in both cases with your dad and your mom, which he did. The second thing he said to me is that I'm going to make a recommendation. He says, you're a very sharp young man, because I had taken trial advocacy with him as an adjunct professor, and he saw that my technique for doing mock trials, he said, you're good with communicating with people. He says, you'll be a good trial lawyer. You just got to learn the law. So anyway, we ended up going through the process where I took him up at his word. So I graduated and ended up going back to the law firm, worked for 2 years, making really good money. But I was unhappy because I really wanted to do criminal law. They did a little criminal law because I went to court, and then they did what they call pro bono stuff, which means free, and they did it for the public, and they handled special cases, but not in a normal course. So anyway, I left in '80 and started working with some other lawyers, and I didn't like their ethics, so I started Richard Wright and Associates, a law firm. And my primary role in the law firm was I was the owner of it, but I also was the #1 attorney for criminal cases. We started doing entertainment, sports, radio, and TV, because the person I had met by the name of Mary D., she had gotten into not just radio. She was doing TV at WGN Channel 9. She started doing that in about 72 or something like that. And so I was introduced to a lot of radio and TV people and started giving them advice and information. And so then I ended up developing a law program called Know Your Rights, which was a play on words, WRIGHTS. And I was advising people about their rights. I acquired the number 9744487, which spelled WRIGHTS. And I found myself in a situation where I was coming along. And so in the meantime, by the way, I backtrack. When I graduated in June of '78, October of '78, my third daughter was born. And so I had 3 girls. So anyway, my first wife and I started going in different directions in life. And so we ended up divorced. And I ended up moving into Hyde Park, an area in Chicago, where some of you may know that's where Barack Obama lives when he's in Chicago. And so anyway, while living there, Harold Washington, who was the first African-American mayor of Chicago, who I had met previous to that and worked in a campaign with him on several things, including helping to get Dr. King's birthday a national holiday. I was instrumental in the state of Illinois to help it done with Harold Washington's help, because he had done that for the state of Illinois. So anyway, I met him and we became good friends, and I was going to do some work with him, but he passed away and suddenly the day before Thanksgiving in '87. So I decided, you know, I was leaving Chicago and moved to the suburbs, which is where I live now, in the suburbs. And so anyway, I found myself meeting another young lady and got married. And I found myself with her. We had a child that was born in 1990, and that was a girl too. So I had 4 girls. So then her mother became the village president or mayor of a town called Ford Heights and invited me to be the attorney for her and prosecutor for the village. So I took the job, but I told him I wasn't going to take the job unless I can carry a gun. He said, the only way you can carry a gun is if you're a police officer. I said, well, I really would like to do something. I don't want to become a police officer. She said, well, you could do it part-time, but you'd have to go to take these courses, and I did. And I began to take the same academy courses that other law enforcement officers were taking, and I ended up accumulating many hours. One of the first was passing the firearms requirements, so I had the legal right to carry a weapon. I had a badge. And then I was assigned to work periodically with the drug team where we went out and did raids. I also dealt with roadblocks and other things of that nature. I never wore a uniform, always wore plain clothes. So in the meantime, what ended up taking place was as I was doing that job, it was made clear that the chief of police was under investigation, and he had to step down and was subsequently indicted. And the new chief came, and he asked me if I would, help him out because he found out I was clean, and I was asked to be the internal affairs investigator, and then an investigator on other issues. And so I did. So I was carrying all those roles, and I did that. And then I ended up becoming a minister. I had gone to seminary after law school, 91 to 93, as you saw the information in my profile. And so while I was there, I found out that my ex-wife, my second wife was the ex-wife, and pastor, they did their thing. And so I ended up getting divorced in that situation. My period of time of being village attorney, prosecutor, police officer was 89 to 93. And so I learned quite a bit there, and it was very interesting. I never knew that I was going to end up in the role I am now, that that would be beneficial for me. And by the way, that town was full of drugs, and I learned a whole lot that I, learned in terms of being able to teach this course along with my law enforcement experience. So anyway, I met a young lady and we got married, and a third wife, and we got married, and now we've been married 25 years, July the 28th. Well, she and I have, my first child with her was a boy, so I finally got a son, very emotional, because his name is Richard. So I had another Richard. By the way, I forgot to tell you, my dad that was killed, his name was Richard. I wasn't a junior because my mom, Sarah, wanted her maiden name in my middle name. So anyway, my son that was born, Richard, will be 24 this Sunday, the 12th. Actually, you heard me talk about my second daughter born in 72. Hers is May 12th also. She'll be 48, so they exactly double the age. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. So I found myself in a situation where I ended up joining another church, and I started living my life by these three words: God is able. And later on, you will find that I pastor a church with that same name at any rate. Well, here's my point. So in 2000, I decided that it was time for me to retire from practicing full-time law, and I would do various things such as teach special education, dealing with at-risk students, and did pretty good with them, as I found out years and years later. One particular is now a criminal justice professional that I had lost contact with, but she kept hearing my voice when she was in high school and how she was incorrigible, but she is successful at it, and another young lady is doing pretty well, and some others are as well. But anyway, I did that, and then I ran a janitorial company for a while, for a company called Service Merchandise, for a company called Jim's Maintenance out of Oklahoma. and I was responsible for 26 stores. Well, they went out of business, and then I started doing closings with the title companies where people were refinancing their homes, and I was hired to do that. In the meantime, that started working well and okay. But then someone approached me in 2011 with the opportunity to work at this school that I had never heard of called Rasmussen College. And so I did my research and then found out about it, that it was a credible institution. And so I decided to try it out. And I interviewed for a job in business law, residentially, at the Romeoville campus. And they hired me, and I started teaching business law residentially. But I made it known to the dean that I was a criminal justice person, and so I was, at that time then, offered the opportunity to work in criminal justice and start teaching. And I did that residentially for a while. And then they came to me in 2012 or 13 and announced that the program was going online, and I had to learn the systems. You can imagine a person who hadn't been heavily involved with computers. By the way, I started using computers in 1999. Prior to that, if you mentioned a mouse, I thought you was talking about an animal. If you mentioned spam, I thought you were talking about something to eat. But at any rate, the point of the matter is that I became proficient pretty fast because I believe in learning quickly any process. As an adjunct professor, and finally in 2014, it became clear that they were going to be looking for a full-time person to take over a job of a person that I came to know as the state program coordinator of the School of Just Studies for Illinois, which had responsibility for 4 campuses: the Romeoville campus, the Mokina campus, the Aurora campus, and the Rockford campus. So I applied for the position and was hired and became full-time in June about 2015. So I continued doing that job, and I think it was 2014. But anyway, I continued doing that job. Yeah, it was June of 2014. So I took the job and ended up starting to teach 3 classes online, and continued to do that until the following year, 2015, when they came and they told us that they were changing the setup. They were doing away with state program coordinators, and they were taking all of us who were state program coordinators for the various jurisdictions that Illinois, we had Wisconsin, we had Minnesota, we had Florida, and so we had all of us who were state program coordinators we were already full-time instructors, but they added more classes. So thus we started to teach 5 classes, and since that time, that's what I've been doing. I started out at that time at the associate professor level, then became assistant professor, and now I'm Professor Dr. Richard Wright. So all of those things have led me to teach many of you guys down through the years. And you've learned something and will continue to learn that I operate with passion about this job because of what happened. I want to prepare criminal justice professionals to have 3 tiers. First, ethical, professional, and then educated. And that's all 3 that I operate under. And I demand that of my students, and I work with you to help you, and you could be successful. I've been involved with students even after graduation. I yesterday spent time sending out 2 what we call LORs, letters of recommendation. I've had to make phone calls for students in various roles, from paralegal. I've helped students who want to go to law school. In fact, I'm working with one right now, and or former graduates of mine, and I've done all those things. So here I am with all that experience. You have me, and so now you know I say adversity is the springboard to success. I can empathize with you no matter what circumstance you may find, and I can relate, and I'm an overcomer. But I do tell people, don't let your obstacles stop you. They can slow you down, but don't let them stop you. I am very happy with what I do now. I love helping my students. And as I said, I'm 69 years old as of a week ago today. And I find myself still full of fire and enjoying what I do. And so I thank you for this time. I know it's a little lengthy, but I wanted to make sure you understood where I'm coming from. And so I'm going to give you a phrase that I want you to apply for this assignment. And the phrase that I want you to do in this particular course, and I want you to never forget it, is adversity. That's the word I'm looking for, adversity. And so you give me that, and you'll get your points. Now, I will hope to see you next Monday at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, where we'll go an hour or to less in terms of lectures from this point on. So I'm going to wish you a good day. Have a great weekend, and happy Mother's Day to those of you who are mothers as well. So I'm going to say good afternoon. Usually I'll say good night, but I'm going to say good afternoon.